Carsington Water is an impressive beast, England's 9th largest reservoir, now owned by Severn Trent Water and open to the public as a showcase for the company's environmental credentials and to enable it to boast about its achievements. Of course, it was planned and built under public ownership. With the remains of March blizzards coating the surrounding Peak District hills and the meltwater trickling into the depleted reservoir, it's still recovering from last year's massive drought and just 85.5% full. And it may not get any fuller, with the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology warning of dry conditions in the months ahead, and that rivers are already suffering record-breaking low flows. And as this reservoir takes water from the River Derwent during winter months, pumping it up by 6.5 miles of tunnels and aqueducts to the reservoir, the prospects are not good. In fact, it seems that the private ownership of essential public assets is not producing the investment to provide us with clean water against the backdrop of climate change, especially as government will not challenge the highly profitable monopolies created by Margaret Thatcher 30 years earlier. These days, the priority of Severn Trent and other water companies is to shareholders, to whom they have paid billions of pounds over the past decades. At the same time, campaigners have warned that water companies have not done enough in that period to conserve water supplies by building reservoirs and fixing leaks, and we're now in a position where a few months of low rainfall could cause some areas to run out of water. Customers only see Severn Trent hiking water bills by over 7% this year, and still insisting it has to charge the public to park at Carsington to visit the reservoir, paid for by their taxes and inherited by this company. It's a private monopoly with no competition and no prospect of losing that monopoly, thanks to Tony Blair doubling down on Margaret Thatcher's radical privatisation by saying even the worst run companies can't lose their licence unless the government gives them 25 years notice. Yeah, 25 years. And the so-called regulator Ofwat has allowed prices to rise 40% above inflation. So it's hardly surprising then that Severn Trent and others are now owned by the biggest banks and hedge funds. 30 years on, almost 2/3 of our water supply is now owned by just 20 big financial institutions. At least 85% is owned by so-called institutional investors. Now, Severn Trent is partly owned by global investment funds based in America, Australia, Germany, Bermuda and the UK, organisations with little concern for UK customers facing ever bigger bills. Little concern either for the pollution of our once clean rivers. Combined sewage overflows operated by Severn Trent discharged into the River Severn for almost 29,000 hours in 2021, and in the previous year Severn Trent discharged sewage into rivers almost 61,000 times. The equivalent of 64 years' worth of raw sewage was dumped into rivers and streams in just 1 year. Meanwhile, government says there's nothing they can do about it. So, behind the visual delight of this great body of water sparkling in the winter sunshine is a much grubbier story of massive profit for shareholders and wealthy investors, while customers have large increases forced upon them during an economic slump, inadequate investment in the future, and a government which is impotent because it's abandoned its ownership and powers in the name of private profit. And that's why it rankles a bit every time I pay to park at Carsington, Tiddersworth or any other public asset which has been flogged off to the moneymen.